Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 174 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to continue on our series in which we're talking about building your custom rifle. And in this one, we're going to talk about chassis. We're also going to talk about learning to practice what you're weak at. So we're going to cover some fundamentals. We just had some law enforcement and police sniper teams here. I did some training with them, and they're very wise. They're very good. They're experts, and they are definitely committed to, everything that means something important to them. They're certainly heroes in my book. And their ideas behind training is quite opposite of what most people think, and actually most even departments, I think, get wrong. So I want to talk about training and how to become a better shooter and some fascinating stuff they were able to do with just minimal equipment. It was really, really a pleasure to have them here and spend a day with them with some training and spending some time with them on the line. So ought to be a great podcast. Without further ado, here we go. Before we get started, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine-cut rifle barrels. They're made in the great state of Wisconsin. They are a family-owned and operated business, and they offer a new program called Krieger Direct where you can log on, order your barrel, and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So I always say if you want the best and you need it now, stop over to KriegerBarrels.com. That's KriegerBarrels.com. I'd also like to thank MDT, maker of fine rifle chassis. They make everything from the Oryx right up to the J. Allen or JAE 700 and everything in between. They are an industry leader in all of their product developments. They are growing and really just make a great product. And I always say if you want to upgrade your game with your rifle, one of the things you can do is upgrade it to a stock that fits you correctly. And you can stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com and look over their fine selection today. Before we get started into the actual rifle chassis series and their rifle building series that we're talking about here, and talking a little bit about chassis and things to think about when you're selecting them, things you can do to help get the most from them, things you have to keep an eye on, I want to spend some time and talk about training and fundamentals. We had just had a law enforcement team come through yesterday and got to spend a day with them at the range, training some angled shots. We were up on a 4-story tower, as well as fundamentals training, ballistics training, and really just what a great group of guys and a great set of shooters. But what I'd like to talk about is how good they were shooting in everything but prone, right? And I know this sounds counterproductive, and I want to share this on the podcast because it's so important, I think, when it comes to training. When we train or we're trying to get better at something, or if we enjoy shooting a rifle, right, we always want to train and work on what we're the best at. And I think partly because it makes us feel good. You're shooting great groups and you feel like you're leaving with this level of accomplishment. And there's a hidden danger in that, in the fact that you won't practice what you're worst at or what you need the most work on, because it hands you your behind. It's tough. It will drive you crazy. It's sort of like learning to dance with now your left foot being your right foot, right? You feel awkward, cumbersome, and like you're going to embarrass yourself. Same thing happens with shooting. And what I was so impressed with this team is their focus is on everything but prone and mainly tripod shooting. And they shot some of the best shooting I had seen in a long time off of tripods, and not even locked in. We have a tripod here that's made by Really Right Stuff. It's $2,800, right? Locks your rifle in, but still most shooters at 700 yards would fall completely apart, even though it's super strong, super rigid, super locks in a rifle. You think it's a standing bench rest platform, right? These guys were using just run-of-the-mill, what I would consider good quality tripods, nothing like Really Right Stuff that was $5,000. They weren't using locked-in Arca rail systems that had the rifle locked in like a drum that couldn't move. And some of their shooting, I was watching them, they were actually using something similar to a hog saddle, but really weren't locking the rifle in tight. They were more using it like bracing it or just supporting the front of the rifle. And the rest of it was fundamentals. And they ran targets out to 1,000 yards what I was so impressed with is how efficient they were on the real world training that they would do, out to 1, 2, 3, 4. They were absolutely amazing to watch shoot off these tripods. I can't tell you again how impressed I was. And we ran them out to 1,000 just for fun, and they ran steel out to 1,000 yards. And most shooters can't do that past 700. Then we put them up on the tower. All tower shooting on the 4th floor was done off of their tripods, out to 500 yards. Real high-angled shots, distant shots, really small targets. Think of targets that are, the size of your hand even, and even smaller in some cases. And when I was talking to the gentleman that had the most experience on the team and who may have been sort of their team leader or their instructor, maybe trying to help the younger guys come up, I try not to be too nosy on all of their things in the background of who's in charge of what training, unless they ask me to help on things. So my guess is, speaking to the gentleman that was the oldest on the team, he had said when we were talking about, and I gave him some accolades about how good they are at the tripod shooting, and he had made a great comment. He said, I think a lot of sniper teams or police teams, they're always on their belly. They're always shooting prone. And in one way, that's where you master the fundamentals of marksmanship, but that's just to learn the fundamentals. You apply it to everything else, and they know that there's really small chance that they're ever going to get to, if they have to be put in that situation, that they're going to be in a prone position. And so they practice what they're the weakest at, and they spend most of their time training off of tripods. And man, did it show. I mean, it was amazing to watch them shoot. And for me personally, knowing how hard it is to do what they were doing and how much time they had to spend behind their rifles to get to that level. And it just got me thinking, like last night and this morning, like how could I talk about this on the podcast and say, look, we all fall victims of this. And when we were talking yesterday is when I went to a match, or if I would go to a match, one of the things I was always looking for at the match, because you're going to shoot different scenarios that you were never presented with before, stuff you've never tried before, and stuff you're really going to suck at, right? You're going to shoot a stage and you're never seen the stage before, and you're awful, right? To me, that is worth its weight in gold. I always looked for what I was the worst at, and then that's what I would practice. And, trying to become a well-rounded shooter, I might not be the best shooter at any position, right? But I'm trying to grow as a marksman. And the counterproductive side of it is when you look at shooting that way, or when you start practicing shooting that way, you're always shooting things that you're not good at, right? And so you have to have that mental wherewithal to think that, hey, I'm learning and growing as a shooter, although I'm punishing myself like crazy right now because, man, I suck at this. You have to leave your ego at the door. You have to say, okay, I am going to shoot terrible. I know I am, but I'm going to master this. Whatever it takes, I am going to work at this until I get this figured out. And then you just make it a challenge, and then you start working at it. And I found that a lot of the matches and stuff, besides, I think, having really good dope for my rifle, which I thought was always super important, was, I wasn't the best at every position, but I was pretty solid. And although someone might beat me slung, for sure, I'm not a great sling shooter at all, but I could just hold enough to hold my own that I don't get my head dunked under the water, and then when I get to the next stage, maybe I can catch a couple points on that person. Maybe the best shooter on the line is expert shooting slung, but not really good at some other positions, in which it gives me an opportunity to sort of catch back up a little bit. So my recommendations to you when you're working on and working with a rifle, whether it's your hunting rifle, whether it's your match rifle, or whether, like these guys, I said that these guys are heroes to me. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but they're risking everything to go out there and be that person that might rescue you, or be that person to actually get you out of a situation to save you or your family's lives. And they're risking not only their own lives, they're risking, being sued, they're risking being charged. If you get a really aggressive DA that just wants to hammer them for whatever reason, and they're doing this voluntarily. They're not forced into service. It's not like, hey, you're a police officer, and by the way, you're taking these crazy rules that's going to put you excessive amount of risk. They did it voluntarily. So, my hat's off to all of you guys out there to do this stuff and volunteer to take on these really important roles, as well as the risk that you're assuming now. More now than ever. They need to be given a break. So I enjoyed having them here. I always wish them the best of luck to be safe out there. But I will tell you that they are really smart. They're really great guys, and their hearts are in the right place. And I was really impressed on how the gentleman who was leading the team, at least that was here that I was talking to, maybe the more senior shooter, had talked about how important it was for them to practice off of tripods and avoid shooting the positions that they just know they're good at. And I think that's good advice to pass along here too. So in the last podcast, we talked about stocks, and in this one, I want to dive into chassis a little bit. Chassis certainly have taken a big swing. To say maybe I was an early adopter of chassis, I would say, the early Accuracy International chassis systems for the Remington 700s. I went that route. That rifle fit me so much better than the traditional stocks that were available at that time. My size, my hands, my body, it really became the original AI chassis system. Almost at one point felt like it was the extension of my body. Like when I got behind the gun, it just felt good. And I felt comfortable with it. I got it to fit me properly. The cheek weld and cheek piece was perfect for me. The length of pull, that's the beauty of a chassis system. And so although they make different types and they make different models, you can spend $2,000 or $500. There's different price points all over the place with them as well. But I think besides, making sure that you buy a quality chassis, one that's not flexing, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But I think more importantly is taking the time to try to find a chassis that fits you correctly. It's going to have to be your chassis. It's like if you ride a bicycle, you might find your bicycle seat. If you have a car, you might go out and look at 5 sports cars and hate 4 of them because the seats are awful, right? It's where you're going to spend your time in that driver's seat. And so getting a rifle to fit you properly and getting a stock to fit you properly is half the game, one that you're going to be comfortable shooting. If you aren't 100% comfortable behind the gun, especially in a chassis situation, you're always going to be fidgeting. And when you're fidgeting, you're not going to shoot your best. So what we like to do here is we have a stock wall. So we're in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. We have people come in all the time. We have a stock wall for a reason. It's to get people to get a chance to actually get their hands on these chassis, because the internet is a great part of the influencing culture that you'll read everywhere on what top 10 this or top 2 that, or what's the number 1 chassis in this category, number 1 chassis in that category. And what you're reading a lot, besides more than half of it paid advertising, is people's personal opinions, and sometimes tainted because they're paid or they're commercialized or they're given the stocks to say this. And same thing with YouTube. I'm always really cautious, when we're trying to do stuff here. For example, we bought a 3D printer that just got tons of accolades by all of these people, some of which had small businesses. However, though, most were actually either given or paid, or they were influencers. And we fell victim to it and bought a 3D printer that was garbage. And so even though we're doing our due diligence, or at least we left our tech guy do it, trying to pick out what would be a good starter printer here for us to play with, and we messed up. He fell victim to all the stuff that you'll see flood the internet about the top 3, the top 3, the top 2, the top 1. And not only that, but then might not be the one that fits you properly. It can be the number 1 SUV in America, but if you can't stand to sit in the passenger seat or the driver's seat for more than an hour, it's not the number 1 to you, right? And same thing with chassis. And it's sort of why we have the stock wall here. So if you'd ever like to come in and join us, we usually have a lot of stocks here to choose from. And it's no charge. You can come in and visit, get a cup of coffee. We'll let you handle all the different chassis and stocks and see what you like. What I find amazing, and we're going to come back to quality of chassis here in a minute, what I find amazing is that most people come in with a stock in mind that they want to look at that's going to be their stock. They've already sort of pre-made up their mind that stock A is the one that they're going to buy. They just want to come in and double check, right? They just want to see it in person. And I would say there's more than a 50% chance that they leave purchasing or deciding to purchase something other than stock A. They get a chance to pick up other chassis that they never thought about. And it's funny, you can't make this stuff up, and you can't predict it or bet on it, and who's going to like what stock. I've thrown that out the window because I have no clue. Like, we have a gentleman that took 3rd in the World Open in bench rest and could have any chassis on the planet that he wants. He shoots an Oryx for his hunting rifle. And not that I'm downplaying the Oryx chassis. I think it's a great chassis for an entry-level chassis that for kids shooting, or for, like in his case, elk hunting. He wanted something just battle hardened, and I think the Oryx is really set up well for that. And I think it's comfortable, it's adjustable, it's very simple, and it's reasonably priced. And I think it's good quality. It's definitely a very rigid stock that's very shootable as well. And so take a guy at that level shooting $1,000 and $1,500 rests, and he chooses a $429 chassis for his elk gun when he could choose anything he wants. And that's because it fit him right. It felt good. It was rough and tumble. It checked all of his boxes. And I think that's the beauty of coming in and trying to get your hands on as many chassis as you can before you make your decision. The other thing you can do is go to a match, and maybe during the match off to the side, or maybe in the morning show up an hour early, or at the evening when the match is over. Sometimes they have some open range time. And if you see somebody with a stock that you're interested in, ask them, say, hey, after the match is over, do you care if I hook up with you for 5 minutes and check out your stock or check out your chassis or whatever you're shooting? And that's a great place to go, because you might have 120 shooters there and 60 different types of stocks and chassis and lengths of pulls and accessories. And it's really like a big shopping gallery as to, all the cool stuff that you can buy in long range shooting. So that's my suggestion right out of the gate, is try to get your hands on as many of these chassis as you can before you make your purchasing decision. I think in the end, there's a better chance you're going to wind up with something closer that's going to be your final stock. The second thing is not all chassis are made equal. And this falls into the category of a lot of your hunting chassis rifles that are manufactured. So without throwing out any names, you'll know that there's 2 or 3 hunting chassis rifles that have come onto the market that have just really, with their advertising dollars and how smart they are in the marketing, is really, I don't want to say taking the world by storm, but it's given you a really great alternative to a traditional rifle stock, right? But you have to be careful when you're selecting any of these, especially when you're looking at chassis. I call it the tactic cool look, COOL. And when you see that, that should be a little bit of a red flag. And yeah, you want a stock that looks sexy and looks great and has a little bit of pizzazz. Some guys will get them custom Cerakoted, so they're a little bit different than everybody else's, and that's fun, right? But a lot of times, a lot of your chassis have a lot of flex in them, and in areas that they look the part, they're not as strong as what they should be. And my test is I will get on the gun with the bipod locked as strong as I can. So our bipods will pan, and we can also get them to tilt. We can rotate them left and right to level the gun up. I will lock that bipod up tighter than the drum so that stock cannot make the bipod tilt left and right. And I'll actually grab the grip while I'm prone, and I'll actually start putting pressure left and right. And what I'm seeing is, can I roll that chassis left and right a little bit? Can I get it to bend? And then also when I'm putting my face on it, can I feel the chassis compress a little bit and get a little spring to it? Like if you watch the front end of the chassis, if you put pressure back where your cheek piece and hand and face go, you'll watch, because you're putting pressure back behind the receiver, that the chassis will sort of bow a little bit in the middle, and that front forearm will come up closer to the barrel. And then lay your hand across the barrel in the front of the forearm of the chassis. Maybe I'll do a video on this. If you want, next week we'll try to show a video on how we test chassis. But you can stick your hand on the front of that barrel, wrap it around the very end of the barrel, and then grip the stocks below it on both sides with your fingers. That way you can sort of feel both. Reach back where the scope's at and try to, with the bipod locked really hard so it can't twist, and just roll that rifle back and forth left and right by the top of the turrets on your scope, or by someplace you can get a grip on it, and you'll actually feel that barrel and the chassis rolling against each other. And that is not good. What that means is this: you're creating a springboard underneath your rifle. When you have anything that bows and flex, you're preloading tension. And when the rifle fires, that allows it to come out. You're introducing other things that now have a reaction to the recoil and a proactive push or pull in different directions. And so one of the things I really, really loathe about some of the chassis that are out there, they are not shooter's chassis. They are chassis that look the part, and if you handle them properly with care, not putting a lot of pressure on them or twisting and pulling, if you're really gentle with them, you can actually get them to shoot pretty good. And there are techniques to this, and we should probably cover this in our online long-range shooting school. But they are super sensitive to your inputs, because if you put too much pressure on them, twisting them, trying to roll the gun around, or face pressure, that forearm collapses a little bit, and when it recoils, think about somebody coming off of a springboard or a diving board. If you're just standing on the end of the diving board and then you push down and jump, when you come off that diving board, it's all over the place, right? And the same thing happens with the rifles. You can preload these spring tensions that when the rifle fires, it's able to actually push and come out. And so when I'm evaluating stocks, I don't care how they look. The Accuracy International chassis, to this date, the original AI, was ugly. I mean, it was basically a giant block with a thumb hole in it, right? And most people look at it and think it's carved out of a 2x6. It really wasn't a pretty stock for sure, but it checked a lot of boxes for its rigidity, how it could be handled not introducing and flexing, pressures when you're getting ready to shoot the rifle. It didn't flex, it didn't bow. When you rolled the rifle around to level it up, it didn't twist the forearm underneath the barrel. So this is really what you have to watch for, because as you're twisting the rear of the underneath the receiver, which is attached to the stock, the bipod is free floating from the barrel. They'll actually turn a little bit from each other. I'll do a video next week. If you guys want to see it, you can stop over to YouTube. I'll make it a point to get a video up and just show you what this looks like and how to check it. But this is what we look for. I don't care what the stock looks like. I want it to fit me extremely well, and I want it to be really rigid and not flex and bow. And if it's the ugliest stock that fits me the best and is super rigid, that's my stock. Maybe give it a custom paint job, give it something cool to cover up the uglies. But, just be careful. You do want a nice looking stock, I know that, but make sure that you don't sacrifice the quality of the shootability. One of the stocks I think that would fall into this category would be like if you compare the XLR Element compared to the HNT 26. And I know that I might get some pushback on this, but when I talk to customers, I tell them the truth on this. So the XLR Element and the HNT 26, just to give you a comparison, I consider the XLR Element, especially when you can put like the C6 buttstock on it or the carbon buttstock, so you can switch a couple parts around, but I consider that like a dual purpose rifle, or potentially a rifle that's not uncomfortable out to 1,000 yards. It really is. If you change up the buttstock to like something like the C6, it really is a shooter's rifle. I mean, you can run it. It's very rigid, right? And then you can add weights to it and other things. And then if you took the XLR NV Pro and you put the carbon buttstock on it, that's really a long-range hunting rifle, without a doubt, featuring a chassis. Again, it's super rigid and tough. The HNT 26, I always say that is a hunting rifle. It can be shot to 1,000 yards. And we had, for example, a 15-year-old girl purchase one with her dad a couple years ago, come in and shot it. And she ran it through the long-range shooting school. And she ran it really, really great. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a great shooting stock. But as I was explaining to her through the school, as well as other customers that purchase it, it can flex a little bit more. It's not a solid, rigid aluminum chassis. It's a carbon fiber front and rear. And it's going to be a little bit more sensitive to bad input into the gun, and it's going to react to it. And so to shoot those chassis in traditional hunting scenarios, no problem. 500-600 yards, it's a great chassis. If you're going to shoot it at like 700 into 1,000, you have to be a better shooter than the chassis. You have to be really sensitive not to jam up on the stock or to put a lot of undue pressures on it, because it will react to it. And so she shot it great through the school, and I was so impressed. I mean, she almost took our Top Gun hat, and she did it with a hunting rifle with a carbon barrel, and she did it with skill. She could run that rifle. She knew that it was a little sensitive. She had to be a little bit more organized in her thoughts when she was shooting, that she wasn't putting undue pressures on the rifle. She had to be a better shooter to run that rifle at that level. And I think that's where you get the separation of some stocks. Is some stocks will give you some grace that you might not be perfectly able to consistently get on the gun every single time and hold the same amount of pressures on it. Some stocks are going to be a little bit more forgiving than others too. So if you take like a much heavier chassis that's built more rigid, that's not going to flex and bow, you can be a little bit less of a shooter and probably run it pretty good. It's not going to react to your inputs quite as fast or react quite as badly as something that would really super flex. There are stocks out there. People always ask, we don't see this chassis that I was looking at, or we don't see this on your website. And normally because we don't like them, or there's something about them just not quite right. Like, we're always shooters first. We love marksmanship. We like hitting stuff. I've always left the tactical side of it. That's not my cup of tea. We're a marksman here. We love the art of what we do and accuracy. And for us, shooting stuff and hitting it is what it's about, not shooting at stuff with something that looks awesome. And there are some stocks and chassis out there we just don't build on. And that's because their quality isn't up to what they need to be for us to be able to run the rifles appropriately and hand a rifle to a customer with confidence that this is going to be a great rifle. It would be like setting you up on a blind date with the most high maintenance woman on the planet. I don't care how good looking she is, right? You're going to be like, yeah, this is crazy, right? And so we don't want to set customers up with a really high maintenance stock that requires super attention to detail, right? So before we continue on, I do want to say thank you to our last sponsor. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They're made in the great Canadian North. They are probably one of the safest triggers, which in my mind is the most important part of it. They're easy to adjust, end user to install. Just really my favorite. So when people purchase rifles or rifle kits from us, we always recommend Trigger Tech. They make a single stage, two stage. They make triggers that go down from 4 ounces to 3.5 pounds, and make them for different makes and models of rifles as well. So if you want to upgrade your rifle in your game a little bit, stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com, and look at all of their fine selections today. All right, so final thoughts. We always encourage customers, if they would like to come in and spend some time with us here on the stock wall, they're more than welcome to. So you also see on our website that we'll have some changes to it, and you'll see that our rifles are broken down into level 1, level 2, and level 3 rifles. I just want to give an update on what this is going to look like and how we're trying to stage this in the future. So a level 1 rifle is a complete rifle kit minus your trigger, in which you can assemble and then complete the entire build yourself from components. We consider that a level 1 build. That is where we think the industry is going to go, and we think 5 and 7 years from now, we hope to be the leader in that market. The level 2 build is a completed rifle, completely assembled, with the only thing you having to do is install your trigger. So the level 1 build does require an action wrench and a barrel vise and some simple tools to put together. Some customers do not want to do that, and we certainly understand that, and we will put the entire rifle together, still be considered a kit build, but a level 2 means the only thing you have to do is install 2 trigger pins that come with the rifle and put your trigger in. And then at the request of customers, we are going to offer a level 3 build, and a level 3 build is a completed custom rifle trigger installed. And we're going to do that at the request of the customer, and that way we can complete the rifle. There are some customers that do not want to work on rifles, just like there are people that do not want to work on their cars. It might be time, it might be effort, it might be because you just don't want to do it. And we get that part for sure. And so you'll see that coming up and be active on Saturday, level 1, level 2, level 3. And just to go over the difference again, is level 1 is a complete component build. So you'll get your entire kit in individual components, and you'll assemble it, and you'll see instructional videos coming online. Level 2 is a completed rifle without the trigger. You'll install your own trigger. Level 3 is a complete custom rifle built by Wolf Precision, ready for you to take out of the box and go and enjoy. And don't forget, with any of these builds, you can come in and do our build assist with us here, in which we'll go over the build with you in the morning and take you to the range in the afternoon and zero and fit the rifle. That's sort of part of what we do. And we've had customers come in from all over the country to take advantage of this. We think it's a great way to deliver a rifle, especially at the level that we're building them at, and we certainly enjoy having people come in and doing it with us. So you can check all that at wolfprecision.net. Also, stop over to our online long-range shooting school. It is moving right along. We are getting ready to stop and talk about magazines and fitting them properly to the gun and how important it is. And then we also have some bonus content. The next one's going to be on BDC, reticles, and turrets. So we got new videos coming up on Saturday. If you want to stop over and learn more about it, our online long-range shooting school is our entire in-person shooting school that you can take from the convenience and the comfort of your own home. You can learn more about that at wolfprecision.net, or look for us under Patreon, and you can sign up and register there. Go back to our website and follow the videos in chronological order. Nice part about the online school is you can go back and revisit any of the topics at any time. And we actually have school alumni going back through, and just as a refresher, coming through the course again, but not having to come the whole way into Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So you can learn more about that at wolfprecision.net. Look for our online long-range shooting school. The last thing I want to talk about is we are working really hard every week to do a blog. Some of it's based on our podcast, but more in detail, I would say, just food for thought. So if you want to stop over to our website, it's wolfprecision.net, and look for our blog page. We try to answer every week. We get a question that we're like, hey, that is something we should probably expand on, and just talk about that in our blog or on our podcast. And this is where we come up with a lot of the content. It's just real life experiences and saying, hey, this is what we ran into this week, and here's how we would answer it, and this is some ideas for you. So you can stop over to our website and just look for our blog page. And if you want to see some of the older blogs that we have there, we think it's a great read. And then you can also sign up for our newsletter. We send out a link to our blog every week as well, and you can register for our newsletter online as well. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. We just finished our last long-range shooting school in-person class, so this was a private department that came through and booked us for a day. Really enjoyed it. It was a great 2023. We certainly will put this in the books as probably the hardest we've ever worked, with moving our building and range in the same year and putting in new machines. But We will never look back and say that we regretted the effort that we put in. Just a reminder for 2024, our long-range shooting school dates are up. We are only offering 13 classes and allowing 65 students for the entire year. So if you would like to join us, or if you're thinking about joining us here at our 3-day in-person long-range shooting school, you can register now. And if you register before December 31st, you will receive $50 off as our way of saying thank you, and a free t-shirt and hat when you come in and join us. So you can stop over to wolfprecision.net, register now for our early bird special. Looking forward to seeing you all next year in our 2024 shooting season. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us here. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy the podcast, you would like to share it, we really appreciate that. If you wanted to leave a nice comment, we appreciate that as well. And if you really enjoy the content, you can stop over to Patreon and look for Wolf Precision, and you can join what we call our Wolf Pack, and it's $3 a month, and support the podcast. And we really thank everybody who has taken the time to do that as well. Thank you. It really helps out with a lot of the equipment and time that we take to produce the content, and it always helps out keeping it part of our business model as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson, and this is Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.